Welcome to the Select Star Podcast, your resource for innovative technology, developer topics, and more. Here's your host, Margot McCabe from the HarperDB team.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Select Star Podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. Today, our guest is named Byron Ruth, and he is the Director of Developer Relations at Synadia, which we will learn all about today. But Byron, I'm super excited to chat with you. So thanks for joining today.
Thank you for having me. This is exciting.
Yeah, it is. I know. And there's some exciting reasons that our company HarperDB is chatting with your team, which we'll get into in a little bit. And where are you calling in from today?
Pennsylvania.
Okay.
In the US. Yep.
Nice. Very cool. So yeah, before we get started, would love to just hear an intro on sort of who you are, your background in tech, journey to what you're doing today.
Sure. Yeah, I started actually in tech during college. I got into programming, doing websites and whatnot, and I actually went to school for biomedical engineering, so it wasn't even computer science related or anything like that. And I started learning programming on the side, and I got an internship at the Children's Hospital Philadelphia. And I sort of learned programming on the job largely. And I was there for 14 years, turns out. And I sort of went up the ranks of doing pediatric research, or supporting pediatric research through building software applications. I eventually led a couple engineering teams, and I left not long ago, being a director of engineering there. And so I joined Synadia end of July. Actually, the last week in July, I started at Synadia. So have a lot of healthcare experience, pediatric research experience, and that was my tenure of professional growth, I should say.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm sure you hear a lot that's sort of a unique path into where you are today. I mean, there's obviously no right or wrong path into engineering, but I feel like a lot of people that I have on this podcast have really, I guess, not what I would expect journeys into why they originally started learning coding, or what like moved them away from what they were originally hired to do into engineering. It's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
and I'm sure you can pull from those, I'm sure you can pull from even what you studied back in college and what you first started out as. I'm sure you can pull from the different types of engineering and areas that you were in, because tech, I think there's a lot of metaphors for tech and how you can pull from those different skills.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, one of the main things I would say, working with, so research in general is interesting because you're in that environment, you're working with physicians, nurses, all of these healthcare professionals who are also happen to be doing research. So they're actually like in the clinic, like in the hospital, caring for patients, and then they spend a few days a week trying to perform research as well. And so something that I learned, and actually, because I get asked this question often, how do you transition into developer relations from being like pure engineering and in that domain? And it turns out that there's a lot of translation and a lot of kind of filling information gaps when working with healthcare professionals and trying to bridge understanding of engineering and technology to medicine and healthcare. So I sort of evolved into being this person who could translate between the various audiences, between the engineering team and our end users in this case, which are the researchers. And so it sort of got me into like writing more content and speaking a little bit more high level and being a good translator for these two groups. And so that's sort of what started piquing my interest more. And when Synadia sort of, and I can get into that story, how that all transpired as well, but eventually Synadia reached out and said, "Hey, would you be interested in this role?" And I was like, this is perfect timing. I feel like this would be a fun new experience. So I accepted.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I can see why you'd get asked that question a lot. I think developer relations or developer advocacy is still a semi-new role or area. Even if companies have been doing it for a while, I think the term is still a little new. And it's actually, there's not a lot of people that are a good fit for it, because there's tons of developers, and then there's tons of people that are comfortable being customer facing and sort of creative and on the content messaging side of things. But to be able to be that liaison in between all of that, I think takes a pretty unique skill set. So it's definitely in high demand right now. And I think to be able to, and I think a lot of times people are getting more poached and recruited for it than looking for it. Like, it seems like a lot of people fall into it and think, okay, actually, yeah, that is a really good use of my experience and skill set. So I think that it's always interesting to hear people's journeys.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to jump into sort of what is Synadia, in case folks listening aren't familiar. Just maybe high level overview on what is Synadia, and then we can jump into what is NATS and a couple other things.
Sure. Yeah. So Synadia was founded in 2017 by Derek Collison, who is the creator of NATS. He created NATS, I think about 11 years ago now, 12 years ago. So NATS predates Synadia, but Synadia was really, and these are my words interpretation, but based on hearing Derek talk about Synadia in past podcasts and presentations, he sort of took NATS and wanted to make NATS, as he typically refers to it, as sort of like this core infrastructure, this dial tone, and he wanted to one of our core products and services is called NGS, and it is a global deployment of NATS, and so across multiple clouds, multiple regions, all over the place. And so the user experience of that is really, you can sign up. There's a free account tier, but you get basically a set of credentials, and you can use any of the NATS clients, including the CLI, and you basically connect to NGS, and that's it. And you can just deploy clients. You can deploy clients in, again, different clouds, different regions, use that same endpoint to connect to NGS, and all of the messaging and all of the Jetstream capabilities will just work out of the box. And so it's a completely location transparent and global deployment of NATS, essentially. And so it's really kind of intended to be used as a backplane, for lack of a better term, for companies who don't necessarily want to deploy NATS, even though it's fairly straightforward to do that, but you sort of get this global deployment out of the box for free, and you don't have to worry about where your clients live, because NATS has intelligent routing of like, oh, this is the closest server to this client, and if I have a service being able to handle like a message and reply, then it's going to route it to the closest service. So it sort of handled all that transparently for people. And so yeah, so that's NGS. So Derek, I think, wanted to bring this and basically say Synadia is going to be the company that can host this the best, because we also employ all of the core contributors naturally. And so there's that product offering, more of like a SaaS offering. And then the second offering that Synadia brings is sort of the other end of the spectrum, which is for companies who don't necessarily want to use or can't use a service provider like that. There's also a enterprise NAT subscription, as it's referred to, and this is more of a support model, helping with architecture, but all of the NATS servers are deployed either on premises or on their particular cloud VPCs, for example. So there's sort of two ends of the spectrum, but depending on where the customer's at and what their needs are, we sort of can adapt different solutions for them.
Okay, got it. That's really interesting, and it's it seems like maybe this is one of those cases where a lot more people have heard of NATS than they media.
Yes.
So it's always interesting to hear like the background story of who's actually managing this technology, who created this technology.
Yeah, yeah. It is humorous at times because there's a lot of people who know about NATS, have heard of NATS, because it's been around for a long time. Just as a funny example, I've been a user of NATS actually at my previous employer for like 6 or 7 years,
Oh, wow.
dabbling with it. So I already had a lot of background with it as well. And so I was already sort of part of the community. And even though Synadia only started in 2017, like I never heard of them when even at that time. So it was one of those things where it's like there's this company that's now backing the future development of NATS and providing the service offering and all this kind of stuff. And so I think there's definitely room for sort of promoting Synadia a bit more and making people aware of it, because again, it's one of those trade-offs with running your own service and needing to have your own head count to run and operate a system, or you can let the experts do it for you. So
Right.
it's so there's always that sort of like build versus buy type of mentality. And but yeah, we just want to make that available as a service offering, and just more people need to hear about it because it's really top notch.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's awesome. And I mean, bringing you on is probably a strategic move in that direction to sort of help doing things like this, doing talks, creating blogs, getting out there and just talking about it. So it seems like a good time that you joined the team. And so I know one, or the main reason that our team at HarperDB has connected with you and your team is because HarperDB is actually now, as of recently, now utilizing NATS within our technology. I'd love to hear, and I know our team is going to be releasing some more content around that, and we're going to be doing an announcement. We're super excited about it, but from your perspective, like either how or why are HarperDB and NATS technologies integrated, and on top of that, what are some other of your favorite example projects where NATS is being used?
Yeah. So the fairly recent, it only was released about 18 months ago, a new subsystem of NATS called Jetstream. And Jetstream is, so NATS out of the box supports what's referred to as at most messaging, at most once messaging. And so basically all of the clients, all of the subscribers have to be online. And when a message is published, those subscribers that are interested in that message will receive that message, assuming no network issues and things like that, but they have to be online. If they're not online, that message is published, that message is dropped. You're not able to recover it. So that's that at most once messaging quality of service, as it's referred to typically. So Jetstream is the kind of opposite of that. So it provides at least once messaging guarantees. So a publisher can publish a message, it goes into a stream, and you can think of it as kind of like a buffer that is snapshotted in time, essentially. And a subscriber can come along later and then connect to it and then receive that message. And so there's plenty of other technologies out there that sort of have this stream, this durable stream type of construct. But yeah, so Jetstream basically introduces this persistence layer for messaging, and it relies on a consensus algorithm called Raft, which is fairly popular among distributed systems nowadays. And so what you end up getting is that you can create these streams, you can publish a whole bunch of messages into these streams, and then you can have as many as it's referred to as consumers, which are effectively views over these streams that can filter down the messages and things like that. And everything is sort of consistent because it uses consensus. And what's more, based on how NATS is designed architecturally and how it sort of can be deployed across regions and all at the edge locations and things like that, you sort of get this really nice distribution globally distributed ability to both publish and subscribe these messages, and you get all of this kind of durability now with Jetstream. So the use case for HarperDB, as far as I understand it, is that HarperDB, of course, is a distributed system itself, distributed database, and which means that whenever new writes to that database get sent to one server, one node in the cluster, that data has to get replicated to all of the other nodes. And so a very core use case for Jetstream is actually for state machine replication. And so that's usually the term it's referred to, but you have one stream that's basically ingesting these bits of state or data, change log, whatever you want to call it. And then that can get replicated out to multiple other nodes, basically a copy of it. And so depending on how HarperDB is relying on it, it might be using consumers to be able to replicate that data to kind of local storage and things like that. But that's a fairly common use case for Jetstream, and it's really well optimized for that. And it's sort of, because it already has the RAF consensus baked in, it's sort of like at the application layer, you don't really have to worry about that problem anymore. You don't have to bake in necessarily a RAF algorithm into your application. So it's a pretty nice primitive for applications and projects and whole platforms to build upon. So to my knowledge, that is the component that HarperDB is leveraging, the Jetstream sort of state machine replication pattern.
Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on. And I know our engineering and product teams are really excited about it. They've mentioned that from a high level, once they did, the research and the testing, that the integration was kind of a no-brainer, because NATS and Jetstream are allowing us to improve both reliability and flexibility of clustering, while at the same time reducing the size of our code base. So I know like our EVP of engineering and some other folks on our team are going to be releasing more details around that with some of the content announcements that we'll have around this. But from everything that I've heard, it seems like it's going to be a pretty major improvement. So we're super excited about it. Are there other, I know you said that this is kind of a standard or common use case and a big reason that the technology was created, but are there any other like example projects that you have top of mind that you're excited about where you see it being used?
Yeah, for sure. There's I mean, messaging is such a general purpose type of thing. So there's you sort of have your typical data streaming connectors. So your typical things like Apache Spark, Apache Flink, a slightly more modern one in the Go community is called Benthos, which is another stream processing framework. So there's like always a bunch of connectors around. There's a handful of microservice frameworks, I would say, that rely on NATS for messaging or possibly a Jetstream for different kinds of queuing and persistence and things like that. A fairly more recent one that leverages WebAssembly is called Wasm Cloud, which is an open source project. And again, it's being able to deploy WebAssembly modules, and all of the sort of communication between those modules rely on NATS under the hood. There's pretty popular project called OpenFaaS, which is functions as a service, and that's relies on Kubernetes as sort of a deployment target, but it uses NATS for, again, messaging between these different functions that are being deployed. There's a really cool project called Simple IoT, which is a platform for sort of managing edge devices, microcontrollers, and things like that for receiving telemetry data or sensor data and things like that, and it relies on NATS in that platform. So there's like a bunch of different sort of projects, and they use different parts of it. And I think increasingly what's cool from joining Synadia too is that we're seeing more and more customers using NATS and Jetstream for sort of like their own platforms. So it's again a pretty common thing that people build on top of NATS. They want to use all the primitives that are there in sort of this one consistent package. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I know last time we spoke with your team, it sounds like, as you mentioned, it's just growing and growing in popularity, and that you're hearing about more use cases super often. So it's probably really exciting from your end to see all these different applications and ways that it's being used. From sort of taking a step back, would love to chat a little bit about open source. Now that you're kind of immersed in this open source world, do you have, if people are listening and considering getting into open source or just looking for tips or anything, like in your opinion, do you have pros and cons of open source or tips on ensuring its success when it comes to having an open source technology or library like this?
Yeah, it's a big question.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, I got introduced to open source very, very early on, primarily as a consumer of it, of course. But actually at my previous employer, I did run a couple small open source projects and sort of try to host a small community. And it was primarily small just because the domain of healthcare and research is inherently fairly tiny, especially in open source. I would say based on that experience and obviously now, the biggest thing, so there's, I guess, two facets to this. One is, how do you grow a community? How do you foster an open source community around a project? And then of course, if someone's trying to get into open source, how do you approach that? So for the first part, I would say from my perspective, fostering an open source community, fostering a project like that, responding to people. So we have a very, very active Slack community which has over, I think, like 52, last time I checked, 5,200 people or something. And which is pretty big in comparison to other projects that are in a similar space. And I think the one thing that the NATS team has done very well over the years is just answering questions, engaging with people, never putting anyone down to say, this is a dumb question, or I've already answered this 100 times, so I'm not going to answer it again. It's really just helping people learn and helping them feel like they're a part of the community, and showing that we care, that we want them to succeed. And I think once you get in that habit and you start doing that, then people build trust with this group of people. So meaning the group of people of the NATS team and by extension Synadia. And it's like, okay, I can come in, I know I'm going to get like a coherent answer, and they're actually going to genuinely try to help me. So I think that's like a big part, and that's something that, like I said, the NATS team has been very good at over the years. I'm trying to help accelerate that even more where I can. And there's some initiatives with sort of beyond just responding in Slack channels. Like one of my core initiatives is to improve the documentation, improve the content around NATS. Before joining Synadia, I actually started this website called natsbyexample.com, which is just like these curated examples that show off different features of NATS, how to configure things, how to use certain clients, different programming languages, things like that, just as sort of a one-stop shop curated website of these examples. Because there was of course like examples and test cases and things like that across all of the client repos and sort of snippets of code here and there in the documentation. But it seemed, being in the Slack channel, being in that community, people are always wanting like runnable examples. Like, just give me some code that I can run and I can start playing with and tweaking. And so that gained a lot of traction. And so I see people beyond just answering questions and beyond just like repeating yourself maybe weeks later because you didn't actually go document it. I really want to take all of that feedback, take all of this information and say, let's start structuring our docs better. Let's provide really high quality examples and things like that. So it's not just showing up and answering people's questions, but it's also listening to them and saying, oh, you've been asking for this for a while. Really good documentation. If you hear about a feature, but you can't go Google it or look in the docs website and find it, that's a problem. And so that's an area where I'm trying to really focus on, because the project's moving so fast. We're helping solve a lot of interesting problems for customers and users and things like that. But the docs and the content are sort of lagging behind. And so I'm trying to really focus on that going forward. So with that, sort of that second half, and then I'll pause.
Oh, no worries.
a person getting into open source. There's different angles to that. So I think a lot of people assume getting into open source means that you have to like contribute code, or you have to there has to be some material output from you, and that's not the case. One of the best things about the Slack community and the dialogue is that we could get a completely brand new person in Slack that they have zero knowledge. They heard about NATS. They think they saw a demo somewhere and they thought it was cool. They have no idea. And what they're contributing ultimately is that beginner mindset, that beginner's sort of like perspective. And you just, as a receipt on the receiving end, I get these questions or others in the NATS team, and you just realize how many gaps there are with understanding, or gaps of content, because obviously we have lived it and we're deep into it and we know all the answers, quote unquote, but someone brand new isn't making all of those connections. And so just the act of showing interest in the project, joining and asking questions and being vocal about the questions, rather than being shy, rather than saying, oh, this is going to be a dumb question, so I'm not going to ask it. Just showing up and asking the question can actually be a great contribution, because it might result in us realizing that there's a big gap on getting started, onboarding, what have you. So in my opinion, that's the easiest way to start contributing to open source. I mean, if you have a welcoming community, and it's even just beyond NATS, if there's a welcoming community that they're just like, hey, if you're new, great, ask questions. We're not going to say these are dumb questions. We're not going to turn you away. That's the easiest way to get started, because on the receiving end, we're always going to learn something new about the perspective, the use case that you have, things like that. So after that point, then yeah, I think it's really like you sort of get comfortable. You can start engaging with the community a bit more. And then other contributions beyond that sort of just depend on sort of your skill set, your comfort level. People contributing to simple things like grammar fixes in the documentation or the readmes or something. That's still helpful. Those are still tasks that take a little bit of effort, even for the NATS team to do. So if you're reading something and you happen to see a typo, just either report it or just even better, just go fix it and open a PR and it'll get accepted. So you can sort of like build up the level, the degree of contribution over time. But again, from the fostering side of things, what we always have to maintain as the NATS team fostering this community is to be welcoming and to not turn people away, because then people won't contribute, and that's obviously no good. Yeah, so that's I think the biggest thing. To be honest, it's that you have to consider both sides. So that's all I'm going to ramble about.
No, I mean, those are some really, really great points that you made there, and I think good reminders that probably a lot of people can resonate with, but maybe don't know what to prioritize or how much to prioritize. I mean, a lot of times in open source, it's a small team that's kind of spread thin, and they don't necessarily have the time to dedicate to engaging with their community constantly. And you make that point of don't write these people off when people are bringing up questions or reporting things or wanting to contribute. If you kind of give them the cold shoulder or don't show appreciation, then why is the community going to want to contribute? So it seems like you guys have built a pretty awesome, I just joined your Slack channel, I think last week or so, but it seems like you guys have built a pretty awesome community where you've gotten to that point where now community members are helping other community members. So you guys don't always have to be the ones jumping in to answer questions. Like that's the ultimate goal, right? Is that you have now other people that don't necessarily work on your team, but they're just so excited and knowledgeable about it that now they can help contribute in that way by answering the questions and responding in there. So definitely seems like the team has done something right. And the fact that you have so many people excited about getting involved and contributing is definitely a sign of that. And I really like the other point you mentioned of you can get started in open source anywhere. Like you don't have to be an expert. It can be as simple as checking docs. And that's something I really appreciate. I mean, docs can always be improved, right? And I always ask the developers we work with and the content creators we work with, if they have any feedback, like whether it be good or bad, that our team is happy to hear it. And sometimes people give us like really specific, tiny little suggestions about one page of the docs, and you have to appreciate all of it, big or small, and take the time to make those changes and take, that's like the best critics are the people that actually use the software. So I think those are a lot of really great points you make.
Yeah. And to your point, empowering people to then help other community members is great. So they build trust in the core team, and then they're comfortable answering on behalf of the project. That's exactly right. I think that's that positive feedback loop that every community tries to get right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, we have some moments where that happens. Like I see it on Twitter or something where someone, before I even have a chance to get to the question, someone else is there, and it's like it's such a great feeling. It's hard to describe. So that's awesome. Well, so yeah, this has been a really, really interesting conversation for me, and I'm excited about spreading the word about HarperDB using NATS and helping more people learn about Synadia. But before we go, I would love to hear just like looking forward, future predictions, whether it be with Synadia and NATS or any other technologies or anything you're excited about.
Sure. So I think, for the NATS project, first off, as of September 9th, so depending on when this is aired, the 2.9 release of the server just came out, and an announcement post is going to be coming fairly shortly after that. So probably most certainly out by the time this airs. But yeah, so that release was pretty big in the sense that Jetstream was released 18 months ago, and based on a lot of usage, this 2.9 release was really focused on sort of hardening, stabilizing things, optimizing things, new use cases for scaling out. So it was sort of a really good release that the team is proud of. It took longer, took about 4 months or so. I think the last release was in May, if I'm not mistaken, 4 to 5 months. So, but it was really worth it, and we're looking forward for users to try it out and see sort of all the benefits that it now has. So that was a good milestone, and I would say a couple future focus areas with Jetstream. It's just a stream of messages, a sequence of messages, but you can build a lot of primitives or abstractions on top of that. And so two such APIs that have been growing in popularity are the key value and the object store APIs. So those are just streams under the hood, but there's client APIs on top, and people are adopting KV in particular. And object store is still experimental at the moment, but we're seeing some adoption there. But the KV API has been very interesting for people because they're already sort of adopted NATS. They're relying on Jetstream, and they're like, oh, I also need a key value store, or I had an existing key value store and I want to swap it out now because I want to reduce the amount of dependencies I have. And the key value store for Jetstream is quite performant. It's not as obviously not as feature rich as something like Redis, which is sort of like a data structure database that has all sorts of interesting APIs. But if someone needs just a straightforward key value store with TTLs and even keeping around some historical values for keys, the Jetstream KV store is perfect for that. And you get all the benefits of Jetstream, which is you can replicate the key value store all over the place. You can still subscribe to it because it's still a stream under the hood if you choose to. So you kind of get a lot of interesting use cases around this key value store pattern. So that's something that I think we're going to like lean into a bit more and write up a lot of really good examples, continue to optimize. And then there's always, especially with customers that Synadia has who come to us and they're like, we have millions of users all spread out across the world, and we need to be able to we want to be able to use NATS and Jetstream. And so there's new levels of scale that, and Derek, the founder, is always thinking about scale and performance, and he's very much into that, always trying to find ways to push the limits beyond any other existing messaging or streaming based technology. So that's always a fun area because it expands the number of markets and industries that we can kind of get into and support. So there's various things like fintech and EV and social and gaming and metaverse industries all over the place who are bringing use cases to us. So it's pretty fun to see sort of the challenges that they have. We have factory floors, a bunch of edge deployments, IoT deployments, things like that. So that's sort of what I'm personally excited for, because I've been not that I want to say I was stuck in healthcare, but and there's plenty of interesting use cases in healthcare for NATS as well. But it's been exciting for me to meet a bunch of customers in different industries and see how they're using NATS or how they want to use NATS, and us figuring out different ways that we can help them make the best use of it. So
yeah, well, that's awesome. Thank you for the updates there. It sounds like there's certainly a lot to look forward to, and lots of moving parts as always when it comes to tech and open source. So really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing. I'm really excited to keep the conversation going with you and your team. I know as I mentioned, our engineering and product teams are super excited about the improvements that this is going to make for HarperDB, and they want to keep contributing as they can. So really appreciate you taking the time to chat, and I'll be sure to put a few links in the show notes for anyone listening. If you want to connect with Byron or Synadia, hop on the Slack, or I'm sure there's a few other places to get connected. And thank you so much, Byron. I really appreciate it, and look forward to keeping in touch.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for hosting, and it's really great talking to you.
Great. Well, have a great rest of your day.
All right. You too. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Select Star, your resource for innovative technology and developer topics. You can find our episodes in all the usual places: Spotify, Apple, Google, RSS, and YouTube. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, and share. You can learn more about HarperDB at harperdb.io.